guys, welcome to the second episode of the Gedunk podcast. It's Dan Barkoff here with my co-host Bobby Jones. We're excited to talk to you guys today. We're going to try out a couple things that we hope you guys really enjoy and have some fun.
Yeah, so in today's episode, one, we're going to show you that basically sailors influence everything. That is my story, and I'm sticking to it. We're also going to talk about the anonymous badass of the week, someone in history that you may or may not have heard about and why they're a badass. And then we will talk a little bit about football here, the NFL, because it's championship week. And we have some very compelling matchups, and I can't help it. Football is like a second job to me as far as following it. So just want to let you know that, hey, it's we're recording this on the 23rd of January, and so you can hold us to our predictions and picks when we talk about NFL. But let's get started now with this segment, Sailors Influence Everything. So what do I mean by that? The first thing I will say before we even get into the vernacular is everything that you may think is cool from historically bell bottoms in the 70s. Sailors did that first. Tattoos that everybody have now. That is a strictly sailor thing.
Wait. I got to interrupt, man. What's the story with bell bottoms?
So bell bottoms,
Why do they have bell bottoms?
Bell bottoms were part of Navy uniforms for a while. And part of it was because the bottom of the pants were flushed out so they wouldn't get caught in lines, or what we call ropes, or what lines are on ships. So they were fleshed out so your pants bottoms would not really get caught in lines, right? And, lo and behold, the 60s roll around, the Vietnam era happens, the draft is reinstituted, well, still instituted, but instituted. And so a lot of civilians started wearing these things after they got out of service. Now, we called them dungarees, specifically the bell-bottom work uniform, right? And notice they were made out of jeans, a heavy jean material, and this, that, and the other. Well, when people got out, they kept the jeans, because they were durable, and walk around in them. And then it started to influence fashion. And what ladies found out in the 70s, that it really was flattering for their figures. And I for one, appreciate that. That was a secondary effect. But bell bottoms became a thing through people being drafted into the Navy and bringing them back. One of the many influences that happened in the late 60s into the 70s about fashion and culture. Because think about it. You had a generation, the greatest generation, that went and fought a world war, got to see the world and see all of these different things. And then, teenagers were introduced into it and it became a thing. So that's just one aspect. But really, our language, our English language has been so influenced by naval terms. So I'm gonna just name a couple, and Dan, I want you to basically say, where do you think that comes from in the Navy?
Let's
and
do
how
it,
we
man.
use it today. All right, so the first one, loose cannon.
Loose cannon. So back in the day when what's the saying, when men were iron and ships were wood, Bobby? Is that
Yes.
what we're talking about?
Yes.
Right. So you've got the cannons on the gun deck, okay, and they're actually tied down. They didn't have like recoilless rifles, and so I'm imagining one can sort of bust out of the ropes and just go the cannon. If it's not tied down properly, is just going to take off and explode and do a whole bunch of damage.
Right, and that's exactly where it comes from. Cannons on age of sail ships, they were mounted in these rolling carriages, and then they would be rolled into the hole that shot out the side of the ship. And these ships, depending on how many cannons they had, were considered more powerful. So a ship of the line, right, and that term comes from ships lining up and shooting abreast, had about at minimum 32 heavy cannons. So if one of those cannons worked its way loose from being tied down, and ships, rock back and forth, that loose cannon would roll all throughout the ship, very heavy. It could knock other cannons off. It could literally cause a hole in the side of the ship. And that's why today, when you say someone's like loose cannon, they are someone that's powerful, but they are reckless and they do more damage than good. So you were great on that one. How about this one? Son of a gun.
Ooh. That's a hard one, man. I didn't know that was a naval term. Son of a
That is a
gun.
naval term.
I'm gonna guess somebody who's like a gunner on the ship, but I don't know. Explain it. What is son of a gun?
No, this is interesting. So again, Age of Sail, Royal Navy, the Spanish Armada type era.
Yep.
Sailors were actually allowed to bring their wives with them on ships. And so wives that gave birth while they are deployed,
Whoa.
the children were called humorously son of a gun because they were literally born in the shadow of those cannons we just talked about.
That is crazy, man.
Yeah.
Son of a gun, huh?
So
Where's
now,
the-
not all ships did that, but some definitely did. I thought that was insane when I heard about that.
Yeah, I've never heard that one before.
Now, one that I think you would know, the term pipe down. Where do you think that comes from? When we say pipe down in English vernacular, what are we saying?
So pipe down, obviously like keep it down,
Yep.
shut up, right? Whatever. So pipe down, I'm guessing at the end of the day, the bosun's mate. Okay. So the Navy's got a bunch of weird jobs, right? So I want for our listeners to understand this. You have what's called a rating in the Navy. And, it's basically your job, and they're all kind of hand-me-downs from back in the day when ships were wood and all that sort of stuff. So you have a quartermaster, so you have a bosun's mate, so you have the master at arms, right? You've got all these sort of naval jobs, and they've taken on modern meaning. And there are some, there's aviation ordnancemen and things like that, but it's basically like your general job in the Navy. So the bosun's mate is the person who, back in the day, they didn't have an overhead. We used to call it a 1MC. Like they didn't have the overhead speakers telling you sort of what was going on. So you communicate with these whistles and things like that. And sort of pipe down, I'm guessing, is like the end of the day, like he blows his little song or whatever, and everyone lights out.
So those of us that have been on ships, we know when you hear the bosun mate pipe, and even to this day, they pipe into the 1MC or the sound system that goes to the ship. But back in the day, open water, it was something that made everybody stop and listen. And typically it's an announcement for the ship, and depending on how they pipe it, it could be something for the captain. If he pipes it a certain way, he'll speak, or something that's routine. And then along those lines too, for whom the bell tolls, ships have bells.
Yeah.
And the bell, the way it's rung, if it's rung one time or four times or all the way up to 8 times, it can mean something different. Usually tells you what time of day it is, because before the age where everybody had a watch, you would listen for bells, right? And so when you got to 8 bells, you knew it was noon on board the ship. And so for whom the bell tolls means, hey, bells ringing for all of you to tell you what time it is and this, that, and the other. It could be chow or this, that, and the other. There are different ways that it's been interpreted over the decades. But you're absolutely right about piping down.
So
Piping down means
is
everybody
like,
goes
shut the
quiet.
fuck up, someone's talking.
Right. That's where that comes from.
Nice.
So there are a couple of more that I think are just absolutely crazy. Let the cat out of the bag. This
one I
was
know.
like, get out of here.
Yeah, this one I know. So this is the cat of nine tails, right?
Bingo.
But okay, so back in the day on naval ships, you could get flogged, right? This is hundreds of years ago, and so if you messed up or whatever, the captain could have you tied to the mast and they could whip you basically, and get flogged. And so they would flog you with the cat of nine tails, but let the cat out of the bag today sort of means like, spill the beans, right?
Right.
So that's a little bit of a jump. I guess maybe if you take the cat of nine tails out of the bag, everybody knows somebody's going to get whipped. That's
so that's kind of where it is. The cat of nine tails was typically something that they didn't broadcast would happen until the very moment it was about to happen.
Right.
So let's say nowadays you have captain's mast, or Article 15 proceedings and other branches of service where you did something wrong, you are going to go in front of the commanding officer, the captain, and you're going to be punished, right? The thing is, you don't know what the punishment is. You still don't to this day. The captain will read off this and walk through why he or she is going to give that punishment, and then bam, the punishment. That the cat is out the bag. So when these guys would get whipped, for lack of a better term, they didn't know until they were in front of the captain, in front of the entire crew, right at the captain's mast, that they were going to be whipped. Once they literally pulled the cat of nine tails out of the bag, then the punishment was known, the secret was out. And so the secret, i.e. the punishment or your comeuppance being known, is what cat out of the bag to this day still means. It came from the Navy. So a couple of more I got for you, because I think these are just fascinating. Let's go with loose ends, right? What is a loose end in today's terms, and what does it mean in the Navy?
Well, loose ends today, right? Something that you have to take care of. It's, a little bit more work that needs to get done, something like that. I'm guessing it refers to lines. So, on the deck of a ship, you've got all these ropes called lines, and holding up the sails and that sort of thing. So if you have loose ends, that would be kind of lubberdly and out of and not very, it's like having a crisp, things are running on time and that sort of thing. There's no loose ends. There's no bits of rope hanging around that could get fouled or tangled up or something like that.
So you're dead on. Loose ends in today's term means, basically unfinished business. We have to do this in order for a project in business to move forward, or for whatever agenda politically, it's commonly used, especially in mafia movies, where it's like, he's a loose end, we got to move on. So here's the thing. When a ship goes to sea, the number one thing from a nautical standpoint, outside of not running into anything or running aground, is you have to do this thing called secure for sea. I don't think people realize, especially if you've been on a cruise or stuff like that, you may feel it a little bit, but ships, especially Navy ships, which are designed not for comfort but for speed and maneuverability, they rock a lot. They're long, they're narrow, and they rock a lot. And so when that stuff rocks, if everything is not secured for sea, if things on a bulkhead, or that's a wall in Navy terms, is not clamped down, it will fall and hit somebody or damage something, right? So a lot of the ways that you secure things for sea is you tie lines, i.e. ropes, onto different things that are on the bulkhead, on the deck meaning floor, all of that, so it doesn't move. And if you have any loose ends, right, then you are not prepared to go to sea. You are not prepared to do Navy things, and therefore you're not prepared to do the business of what that ship is designed for. So the loose end...
What's the heaviest seas you've ever been in?
Wow, I can tell you that immediately, and I think a lot of sailors would probably say the same thing. The North Atlantic in the winter. Transiting the North Atlantic during, November, December, January is unbelievable.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, so when I was XO on USS Anzio, which is a cruiser.
Yep.
And the reason I'm saying this in particular, cruisers are built to be very top heavy. They're top heavy because the hull was originally built for a certain type of ship. And then what happened is the Aegis combat system was invented, and they put those radar systems and weapon systems on top of the ship. The radars, the octagons that you see, they're heavy, and those hulls were not originally designed to deal with that weight. That's why destroyers, which were designed from the ground up to have Aegis, are wider and fatter. They look fatter for more stability. Cruisers, though, are straight up, straight down. So if you know anything about naval physics, the riding arm and stuff like that, the heavier stuff is up top, the more extreme the rocking becomes when you travel. So you're traveling across the North Atlantic that has unbelievable seas, 13, 14-foot seas. And it's not just the swells, it's the confused sea is what they call, where waves will come from one direction and then come from another, and it hits you, and you're just boom, boom.
Is everybody just puking constantly?
A lot of people do.
I would
You
be
can
puking
tell.
constantly, man.
Yeah, you can tell who the newbies are. You can
Yeah.
tell whose first Atlantic transit it is because of that. But those of us that have spent a lot of time at sea, and I spent a lot of time at sea because my first tours were in 7th Fleet, the forward deployed naval forces. That's out of Japan, going all over the Pacific. It didn't really affect me as much. And so I'd be me and our captain would be the ones on the bridge all the time with people with puke bags on the side or going over the side of the ship and throwing up and this, that, and the other. It was hellacious. I mean, the water would come over the 5-inch gun on the forecastle and smash up against the pilot house. That's a lot of waves, a lot of water.
I'm thinking like Deadliest Catch, right? Like
Yeah.
that's my, you know, yeah.
And again, understand the difference between a fishing vessel, a cruise ship, and a cruiser is fishing vessels are designed to catch fish, right? And so they don't have much survivability.
Sure.
Cruise ships are designed for comfort, where they avoid as much as possible, but at the same time, they're wider on purpose. They have a heavier set to try to stabilize the ride. And then a cruiser is designed for weapons employment maneuverability, period. So, hey, if that means the ship will rock and you're at a 30-degree list as you turn, so be it. I mean, and you literally can tell when you rock one way and how your body will balance to counter the rock and then rock the other way. You get so used to it, right? And, you know, someone who's been in the Navy as long as I had or was, you know, I didn't think anything of it until I had to explain it to my civilian friends. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't make much sense to the average human being walking around. But those terms and all that comes from the Navy, and I say it again, and no knock to my Air Force, Army, and, you know, Coast Guard, Space Force brethren, is the most unique branch of service in our military, because you have to deal with a constantly changing environment in ways that affects everything, to include your day-to-day existence. So,
Yeah, man. We would do MAROPS. We called it MAROPS, so maritime operations, right? You know, but we had little Zodiacs, and you know those things you don't want in any sort of sea. I mean, they're made to be in pretty close to shore, and you know you'd have a couple of. You'd have an outboard motor, you know, like a 90 horsepower outboard motor, and there were plenty of training exercises. I never did any maritime stuff real world, but there were plenty of training exercises where half the platoon is like just kind of hanging over the side, puking into the ocean. Yeah, it's brutal. I can't even imagine doing like a North.
It's funny because you guys, the SEALs, you know, y'all have a hard time getting your sea legs, especially in the era in which you served, because y'all did so much so many ground operations, right? Where
Navy
it's
Owls,
like,
man, we were Navy Owls.
yeah,
Air and land. That's what it was.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. I mean, it's like when we would see you guys, it'd be brief, maybe to give you a good meal or something like that, and send you back on your way. You try to give them some ice cream or something, break out something,
Right, dude. Yeah, I mean, there were, you know, the SEAL teams have some units, the SDV guys who do a little more. So SDV is like SEAL delivery vehicles. They're like mini submarine guys, and so they do a lot more with kind of big Navy than the normal SEAL teams. But my MAROPS experiences were largely throwing up 6 miles offshore from Little Creek, Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, but again, that's not what you guys required at that point. Now, what's interesting, you know, the SEALs, you know, the head of the SEAL community here was last year, and, you know, the recommitment to being anonymous and the recommitment back to getting their sea legs and stuff like that. So I think this generation of you guys is going to be a little bit different. But at the same time, the general practitioner aspect that y'all have had to develop is unbelievable. So no one's going to knock you for it.
Yeah,
It's just what the mission required.
Stuff that the stuff that SEALs can do in the water is not really reproducible at scale. I mean, in other units. So for the MARSOC guys and even Army SOF, they have boats and they'll practice with boats, but that's really our thing. The VBSS mission, the visit board, search seas. So cruising up next to a ship that maybe is running not really narcotics, but running weapons to the Houthis or whatever. That was a real world mission that took place a few months back, and a couple guys ended up drowning. So the MAROPS mission will kind of always be there, and there are certain. When I was in, this is 20 years ago, right? But there were certain missions. The European Command, EUCOM, they had a SEAL platoon, and the SEAL platoon was there in case they needed to take down a ship. So there are. That's the part of our mission that no matter how much land and air, there's always going to be a home for NavSoft when you have to do stuff on the open ocean.
I don't think the average person, the average American, realizes just how much contraband travels at sea.
Yeah.
Right? So when you were talking about y'all doing VBSS, and I was like the VBSS officer on my third ship.
Yeah, you guys did that, right? You probably did it more real world than I did, actually.
Well, but it's interesting when we had intelligence saying, okay, this could be really hairy, we call you guys. You know what I'm saying? Because it was hard for us we have to send our guys to training and maintain the proficiency.
Yeah.
And it's a mission area, but not the primary mission of U.S. Navy ships. When it gets to that dangerous point, we call you guys and y'all come in because it's a primary mission set for y'all. The thing that I've always found interesting, though, was, when people see on the news, this is why this is important. When they see on the news, Houthis or this rebel group here or this rebel group there, 9 times out of 10, the weapons they're using to fight that war came from a Navy vessel somewhere, something at sea.
Yeah.
Something at sea brought it there because the entry point of pulling into a port, no matter how beat down the port is much easier than to try to go through land borders and transit, hundreds of thousands of miles to get weapons there.
Yep.
And so, ships can be constructed, civilian ships can be constructed with hidden compartments, this, that, and the other. The actual crews that man the ships can be from all over the world, making it harder to track down real identity. There's a lot more ambiguity that's introduced, and you guys have to not only secure the vessel, y'all got to figure that out on the fly and start putting pieces together and getting that up the chain of command to stop illegal wars from continuing.
Did you guys do VBSS in the Gulf?
So, interesting enough, we had teams that were qualified to do it. And the reason I'm saying interesting enough is based on the actual tactical situation of the Gulf, the question of having a U.S. Navy ship, USS, pulling up where it's highly visible, highly seen,
Sure.
To do something, vice you guys clandestinely maybe doing it, are two different things. Mm-hmm. And so this is one of the reasons why y'all exist, is because anytime a USS anything pulls up, it becomes immediately a political lightning rod, better or worse, right?
Yeah, sure.
A USS ship pulls up off the coast of a country. I saw it in Liberia personally. All of a sudden, everybody stops fighting because they see those big ships and like, oh my God, here come the Marines. Completely stops the fighting, right? And that's a good thing. That's why we have Navy ships that are always deployed around the world. The presence alone shapes things. Yeah. But at the same time, if you know there's something that is sensitive that is happening, that, hey, you don't want the world to know that you know, or more importantly, time is of the essence and we ain't got time, that's when they can call you guys, get it done, right? And there's a certain amount of plausible deniability. I mean, go back to the Osama bin Laden raid where, hey, no one knew what was going on. President of the United States was acting, he was at some type of dinner party and all this kind of, everybody I mean, it was wild, right? And I was in Japan, and I was kind of looking back on it. I noticed certain ships were moving certain areas. I'm like, why are they over there? And next thing you know, we get this report, you know what I'm saying, that this man had been taken out finally. So y'all have that capability. We are a very visible, very loud deterrent, the conventional Navy, more so than any other force in the American repertoire. When an aircraft carrier pulls up into your vicinity, things change.
Yeah,
Immediately.
I can see that. Yeah.
Immediately. But, you know, sometimes it's better not to have the large, loud hammer. You need the soft, quiet scalpel to do what y'all do. So
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's interesting. You know, the VBSS mission is one that there have been real world times where it's been used in really almost every theater in PACOM, the Pacific Ocean, in Southcom, which is like South America, in EUCOM, in CENTCOM, certainly. Like there's no sort of combatant command theater that hasn't at one point or another required VBSS.
I'll tell you like this. I think it's the most underrated warfare area we have in the entire United States military. Here's why. Number one, it's done by multiple branches. It's not just done by us. The Marines have their version of a team, and the Coast Guard have their version of a team. And let me say this about the Coast Guard. You know, we joke around in the Navy, we call them coasties and stuff. Dude, they do hardcore interdiction.
Dude,
Think I'm making
that video? This was a couple of years ago. The guy, I think it's
banging on the freaking main sub.
Like hops out and he's like banging on the submersible. So if you don't know, you should Google this.
YouTube it.
So to run drugs up from South America into America, one way to do it is the cartels have submersibles or semi-submersibles, which are ships that are either capable of like being a full submarine or coming real close and just having a super low profile in the water so you don't pick them up on radar. And there is just an absolutely insane, maybe we can link to it. There's an insane video, this guy who hops onto a submersible and he's kind of in like full kit and he starts banging on the door and then, you know, a bunch of drug runners come out. It's wild. It's a really cool. Yeah, Coast Guard's cool, man.
Wow. And not only, like I said, YouTube that clip. I mean, it's the most badass thing, man.
Absolutely.
But also, though, right, there have been things that the United States and our allies have seized in VBSS that has been used at the United Nations to prove treaty violations, to prove weapons control violations, that has been introduced at the International Court at The Hague to prosecute war criminals. It is literally a force-shaping tool that helps enforce policies that can keep the world safe. And it's an international thing, too. It's not just America and our forces that do it. There are others that do it because it's a peacekeeping mission with a highly kinetic and highly military side of it that people just don't realize. And so when you see a Coast Guardsman or you see people that have done that type of job, man, thank them, because I guarantee you at some point they took an action that directly saved somebody's life.
Yeah.
So,
and they do all the search and rescue, like if you're out sailing one day and a storm comes up, I mean, who you call the Coast Guard, right? And you get stranded. So
I love those guys.
We got it up here, man. Lake Champlain, there's a Coast Guard station. So they're on the Great Lakes. They're everywhere. It's cool. It's a cool service for sure.
We have to put respect on their name. So here's the last term I want to throw out.
All right, let's do it.
Last one. 3 sheets to the wind.
Oh my goodness, everyone knows this. So.
What do you think?
Like hammered, just sloppy fucking drunk.
That's what it means.
What's 3 sheets to the wind? I'm guessing the sheets refer to sails, and if you're drunk, everyone is having a good time and you're not sailing, so they just let them fly. I don't know. What does it mean, Bobby?
So you're absolutely right. In today's term, especially in the Navy, it refers to people who have just gotten blasted.
Yep.
Blasted drunk.
One girl wasted.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just, hey, you got to carry this guy back to the ship, et cetera, et cetera. But it comes from, once again, the age of sails, where The sheets are actually lines that hold sails in place, right? And the way most ships back then were constructed, if three of those lines are not connected to your main three sails, the sails will not stay in place, and now the wind beats up the sails, and you can't control how the wind affects your ship, and the ship acts drunk. It's not under control. It stumbles. It goes all over the place. And so when we say three sheets to the wind, it comes from your ship being drunk due to the sheets being to the wind and not secured and fastened to control the sails. So that's where it comes from. And we still use it, especially sailors, to describe someone that is not under control because they are drunk. So that is how nautical terms, Navy terms, and there are tons more, and we may revisit this a little bit later, have worked their way into American English. As I said at the beginning of this, sailors influence everything.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. So, I'm pretty sure even just blue jeans themselves have their roots in sailing.
Yeah, blue jeans are interesting. So you ever, Levi's, right?
Yep.
So the reason Levi jeans are a thing because the guy Levi Strauss who invented them, he invented them during the 1849 gold rush in California. That's where the 49ers get their name from.
Yep.
And the 49ers also get their colors from the gold rush and the red hills of California.
Okay.
So while that was happening, this man needed a more durable work pants, and he invented it using basically material they used for a lot of their tents when they were out in the field prospecting.
Gotcha.
Here comes the Civil War. The Civil War happens, and back then, sailors, we didn't have washing machines and laundry facilities on ships, so they needed a durable material.
Yep.
Here comes Levi Strauss, all that stuff transitions to the Navy, and it's been such a good fit for us for the longest that until very recently, our careers, when we joined, you still had dungarees at sea.
Yep.
Right now we have flame retardant gear and blah blah blah, and it's all fancy, whatever. But think about it. That material lasted over 150 years in the United States Navy. Jeans and the bell bottoms and all of that lasted for decades and generations of sailors, which is pretty cool when you think about it. And so every time I put on a pair of jeans, I'm reminded of my Navy roots and heritage and how we got there. Right. So it's not just vernacular, it's fashion, it's trends, it's tats, it's all that. Sailors influence everything, like I said. Now, let's move on to a segment that I like to call the Anonymous Badass of the Week. Now, what we're going to try to do is provide a story of an American that you may not know about and what they did that was absolutely ridiculous. So I want you to take yourself to 1945. It's March. And the Allies in World War II are marching towards Berlin. They're about to end this thing once and for all. We're talking about a war. If you count, Europe, 1939, we're in year, 6 of World War II. And so in one particular town on the march to Berlin in Germany, there was a unit, a tank unit. And there are famous tank units like Patton's Army and this, that, and the other. But this is the 7th Army. And there's this man who was literally a scout for a tank unit. What does that mean? Back then, those guys actually were outside the tank. Now, in today's military, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, on what planet does it make sense to be outside of the tank and you're scouting for the tank? Meaning, they scouted ahead looking for possible enemy tankers, possible enemy forces for ambush, which required them to be outside the tank. They would walk ahead of the tank. They would sometimes sit on the tank, but it gave themselves a different vantage point. Well, there was this young lieutenant, who was sitting on board the tank, and as they moved forward, I'm trying to remember the town that it happened in. I can't remember the name. Was it Slavin? Anyway, and we'll read the citation here in a little bit. But this man, literally, they got ambushed. They got ambushed from all sides, all perspectives, because there were buildings and stuff. So the Nazis had the higher ground. And this man gets wounded multiple times. And they try to rush the tank and try to take over the tank. And he fights them off after being wounded. The guy killed 6 Germans, hand-to-hand combat, 6.
Jesus.
Okay? All while already being wounded. And then had the audacity to capture 2 of them, kept them alive, and performed an interrogation to get the advanced positions of other Nazis as they were transiting, which saved more lives, right? The fact that a 6-to-1, 6-to-1 kill ratio is one thing. To save 2 to interrogate is another thing. It saved their tank unit, and all of them basically made it through the rest of World War II because of this, because this was their moment. And this guy did not receive any award for that action. Easily should have got the Medal of Honor, did not. He was initially awarded the Distinguished Service Cross eventually, right after the war. Didn't seem right, and the reason why it didn't seem right was because this man, Lieutenant Edward A. Carter Jr., was amongst the first black officers that got command and got control and authority of units in World War II. And because he was black, they did not push him up for the Medal of Honor that he deserved. And so when President Clinton came into office, they ordered a review of all previously argued, and I mean argued, awards that happened from World War II all the way up through Vietnam and Desert Storm at that time. And what happened, and the reason this review was brought was because throughout the entire fighting of World War II, to include Europe, the Battle of Atlantic, and the Pacific, 2 million African Americans served, not one Medal of Honor was awarded. Now, just doing the math, that doesn't make much sense. And so they looked. And after a thorough review, there were 7 that were selected for the Medal of Honor, and it was awarded in 1997. And the only one that was alive to receive that award in 1997 was Lieutenant Carter.
So he got the award in 97.
He was actually awarded the award, and he had tears in his eyes. I remember it like it was yesterday, because in 97, big year for us, that's when we signed up.
Were we in school yet when they gave it to him, or was that?
It was. I think it actually happened during our plebe summer.
Okay.
Because I saw clips of it when I came home for Thanksgiving, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. We need to look that date up.
Yeah.
But he was the only one that was alive.
All right, I've got thoughts, man. So this is fucking nuts. So Congressional Medal of Honor it's changed throughout the years, okay? So when the Congressional Medal of Honor, when it first got made into an award in the Civil War, they kind of gave it out to everyone. There were thousands of them handed out in the Civil War, and very, very wide variety of actions. But by the time you get to sort of like World War I mean, you really had to do something exceptional. I have a friend, another SEAL, who we were talking about one of the SEALs who'd gotten the Congressional Medal of Honor, and should have gotten it, and that sort of thing. And I always remember him saying, "Well, the Congressional Medal of Honor is you chose to do something voluntarily that you should have died for." Right? So it's not, some people do die doing the act, and some people don't, and they live, but regardless, you should have been killed, right? Like, you've chosen to do something in which you should have died. And so this guy, this is kind of a crazy story. So I'm looking at the citation right now, 8:30 in the morning, 23 March, 1945. So we've got like really a month left in the war, okay? Yep. This is deep into Germany. His squad's taking cover. He volunteers to lead a 3-man patrol. It's this warehouse. He goes out in this field, and Enemy small arms fire hit two of the other guys immediately. Returning rifle, he proceeded alone to carry on the mission, right? So here's the part where he should have been killed. He decides to cross a field by himself to accomplish the mission towards like a covered enemy firing position. He gets down to an enemy machine gun burst, wounded him 3 times in the left arm. So he's shot 3 times in the left arm. He continues on, gets gets shot in his left leg that knocked him from his feet. He took wound tablets and drank from his canteen. I don't know what that means exactly. They probably had like a Tylenol or something.
Yep.
Enemy shoots his canteen out of his left hand with a bullet going through the hand. Disregarding these wounds, he continued crawling until he was within 30 yards of the objective. The enemy fire became so heavy that he took cover behind a bank, like a ditch, remained there for 2 hours. Finally, 8 enemy riflemen approached Staff Sergeant Carter, apparently to take him prisoner. He kills 6 and takes 2 prisoner himself, right? So 8, half a German squad walks up on this dude who's all shot up. He kills the first 6 and then takes the next 2 and takes him back to headquarters. This fits the definition, right? He should have died multiple times. Right? He should have died crossing the field. He should have died when these 8 dudes came out after him. He clearly sort of meets the threshold. Now, one interesting thing about Congressional Medal of Honor is I believe you have to have 2 witnesses. So it must have been people who saw this from afar who sort of, their accounts. If he gets the CMH 50 years after the fact, there must have been surviving accounts of him doing this. It can't even be one person. You have to have 2 separate accounts.
One of the things that's interesting when we look at Medal of Honor awards in this type of scenario, unfortunately for people of color that were actually awarded that award, there was efforts initially to make sure that they got the recognition. And it was always, this is one of these reoccurring themes that I've noticed, it was always that junior officer who is, not a career guy, probably someone that got drafted in, that was like, hey, man, and they documented it. And then the other people in that unit went out their way to document it because at the end of the day, they know that they're alive because of the actions of that person. Mm-hmm. They're like, hey, man, I wouldn't be here. And that weighs heavily on you to make sure that person is recognized, especially if they weren't getting it. And so, like another case, one of the 7, another young officer, black, radioed to have artillery hit his position to take out all the Nazis with him. He sacrificed himself.
Yep.
Right, and everybody knew it. Everybody heard it on the radio. Everybody knew it. And so, you're right. They got to have the witnesses. It's got to be documented, and all of that happened. What blows my mind is someone who, me personally, I've been in some very hairy situations out at sea. Really can't talk about them, but you're just like, oh my God, we could start a 3rd World War or this, that, and the other, and it's like, how do you handle it? The fact that he had the wherewithal to keep himself together after being wounded multiple times, to kill the 6, but remember, hey, we got to figure out what's next, what's happening down the road, to interrogate 2 others. I mean, that's high functioning, man. I'm sorry.
These dudes are, if you get the Congressional Medal of Honor, although I'm sure there are exceptions, but in general, broadly speaking, you did something way above and beyond kind of normal, ordinary, what the military expects of you, and on a normal, everyday basis, the military expects you to be brave, right?
Yes.
And so you're just having courage is not enough, right? It's right. Way beyond that. It's significantly beyond that. So,
and the last thing I'll say on this, which I've often wondered, and I've talked to actual Medal of Honor winners especially when we were midshipmen, they would bring them and POWs to come talk
James
to
Stockdale,
us and stuff.
Man. Yeah,
Stockdale. You're just like,
about James Stockdale, man.
Like, what drove you to be like this? Because I'm like, what is the secret to the sauce? And here's what I have figured out. It's not necessarily the person. It's about what motivates them. And the motivation 9 times out of 10 is not letting their fellow comrade down, their fellow sailor down. They don't want to be the weak link. So, one of the laws of the Navy that we had to learn, our plebe year, is the strength of a cable. It's like each individual link that makes that cable is the strength of it. And so the weakest link is the actual strength of the cable. And you don't want to be the weakest link. So when you talk to John McCain before he passed, or I got to talk to him, I got to talk to Admiral William Lawrence, these guys, when they were in the Hanoi Hilton for 6-7 years, they go back to that thought process. I'm not going to be the weak link. I'm not going to be the one that breaks, and they have better days than others. But there's something that motivates you to be better when it's not about you. And I think that's an aspect, when you look at today's society, that is clearly been lost. Everybody now is like, hey, it's about me. I'm not going to sacrifice for someone else because it's not me. But American history shows us, from, again, the founding fathers, most of them going broke during the Revolution, to someone like a Lieutenant Carter, to say, it ain't about me, it's about my tank battalion. I've got to make sure they're protected. I've got to figure this out. And at some point, me on my soapbox, we have got to rediscover that. We have got to find it, because it is the one thing that has allowed America to continue to advance and become the country that people look at as the example. The sacrifice.
I completely agree, man. There's a friend of the show, we'll have him on for you guys, Sebastian Younger, wrote Tribe, did Restrepo, wrote The Perfect Storm. So, he has this book called War, and there's so profound observations in it, where he said, the military and combat, right, the way it works, the reason a military unit works in a gunfight, in a combat situation, is if you do what's best for you in a combat situation, you're more likely to live, and the unit is more likely to lose, and more people will die, right? So if we're on patrol and we just start getting shot at, and I just choose to hide behind a rock and not return fire, or not look around and tell my guys where to go, all that kind of stuff, if I make that decision, it's safer for me, right? I'm behind, I'm safe. I'm behind. Surviving combat is not terribly hard. Winning at combat is incredibly hard. Surviving combat, if you have no qualms about hiding behind the rock and letting your friends do the work, is not difficult. So what makes the military work is you inculcate this ethos of, I'm going to do what's best for the team, even if that means it's not the best thing for me individually. And so the Congressional Medal of Honor is just the epitome of that, right? You're doing something selfless because it's the best thing for the team, and even though it puts you at great sort of personal risk. So I completely agree, man. I mean, we've got this place, we're at this place in the world, it's not just America, where kind of individual branding and getting ahead and all that sort of stuff has become the thing that many young men and women, but young men are trying to do, and it's not the way,
No,
right?
no.
It's not the way.
And it's funny, because when you adopt a mindset where it's about me first, in the long run, forget combat operations, forget military, in the long run, you're going to limit yourself on what you can achieve.
Yep.
The greatest achievements in human history have been made through a collective effort. It has never been that one person to do it by themselves. Can't happen. Can't happen.
Great.
And so what we're in an age of extreme individualism, because the instant gratification of being an individual brand is what's hyped up.
Yep.
We do not talk about, how my community can be better, right? How can I help others come along on this journey with me? You know why? Because that takes effort. That takes sympathy and empathy.
Bobby,
And also, it takes selflessness.
You know Doc Rivers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so Doc Rivers, if you're not a basketball fan, former NBA All-Star, but then coached
Yep.
a bunch
Atlanta
of,
Hawks.
yeah, coached the Celtics when they won the championship back with like Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And so he's got a quote that I love. I trot this out from time to time. So Doc Rivers was like, and I'm paraphrasing, he basically says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go in a group.
That's
Right?
it.
And it's like that's it, right? You can, yeah, if it's just about you, if it's just about the brand, you go ahead and do it, and you can, you think you're making meaningful impact, but what's hard is organizing people, growing consensus, and trying to bring a group of people to a higher, a higher place, right? That's difficult, and
Now, that is not only a great quote, it's a great transition. So
yes,
NFL this weekend is
of
championship
course,
weekend.
man.
You have the final four left for the NFL championship with the berth on the Super Bowl in the line. In the NFC, you have the Philadelphia Eagles
Yep,
and the Washington Commanders.
yep,
In the AFC, you have the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. And I wanna get your pick on this, but I also wanna real quick just talk about all these teams, the four that are left,
yep.
right, have leadership in the quarterback position. What
True.
I find spectacular about the NFC matchup is you have a rookie in Jaden Daniels who 12 months ago won the Heisman Trophy, been inserted into a town that has been desperate for a winner. They have bad ownership, they have a new owner. They had bad coaching, they have a new coach who here in Atlanta we know very well in Dan Quinn.
Yep.
But they have a quarterback that when I saw him play at LSU, I was like, my God, that guy's going to be good. Not because of his God-given athletic ability, but you could tell when they would flash him on the sideline talking to other players and this, that, and the other. He was a leader, and people bought in. That has transitioned very well to the NFL. His
Yep.
counterpart playing against him in Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts, same thing. Alabama, Oklahoma, leader, carries himself in a certain way, suit and tie, expresses himself very well, respected. The other side, the AFC, obviously you have Patrick Mahomes, multi-time MVP, three-time Super Bowl champ. He is the standard to which all quarterbacks are measured right now. And then you've got, in my opinion, maybe the most totally gifted when you talk about running and throwing the ball out there with the quarterback for Buffalo. Oh God, I just totally forgot his name. Man, I'm getting old.
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen.
Yeah.
He is phenomenal, and he plays for a team that I call it one of the bottom four in the NFL that have suffered the longest. The Buffalo Bills, 4 Super Bowls in the 90s, not winning.
Yeah.
And now this is the fourth time he's got to go against Mahomes in the AFC playoffs to get to the promised land in the Super Bowl and have a shot to finally get rid of that curse.
Yep.
All that being said, who do you have in each game and why?
Bobby, here's the problem, right? So I like the Bills. Okay, so I'm a New England Patriots fan, and I've got a soft spot for the Bills. Like the team in the AFC East you hate is the Jets, right? Everybody hates the Jets. That's the team to hate. They had Aaron Rodgers, and that was glorious how that turned out from my perspective. So I'm rooting for the Bills, and I do think that they can win, man. I mean, I'm rooting for the Bills. I'm rooting for the Commanders. Can they pull it off? The Bills are pretty darn good, but the question is, like, do they have this sort of complex that they can't win in Arrowhead? What's the weather in Arrowhead? I feel like, the Bills should. The Bills should be fine in kind of any situation. I'm going with the Bills. I've talked myself into it. The other thing about Kansas City, they've got some incredible sort of explosive offense, but they're you just can't win. I mean, one of the great things about the NFL this year is you've got like pretty fun parity. There's a lot of teams that are sort of newer faces, whether it's the Lions, whether it's the Commanders, anyone. So I'm going to go with the Bills. The Commanders on the NFC side, man, I'm going to tell you something that my brother, who works for the State Department, lives down in D.C., told me, and I was like, oh shit, I hope you're not right. Okay, you ready for this? I was like, Jaden Daniels looks pretty good, man. He's seems to be the real deal. And my brother goes, yeah, that's what everyone said about RG3. And I was like, oh.
They're dealing with that trauma of losing this guy
Yeah,
after
I
rookie
was like,
year.
yeah, there's a little RG3 about him. Like he's, from this Texas. He can run. He's real skinny. Like he's not super, bulked up like Josh Allen. I hope that guy can stay healthy, man. But yeah, I think probably if I was betting money on this, I mean, I would go Eagles Chiefs, but
Yeah.
my heart is Bills and Commanders. What do you think?
So, first of all, you raised some damn good points. Here's what I think. Number one, let's talk about Bills Chiefs. I believe eventually you got to punch the bully in the mouth. And I also believe there's only one team that has a big enough chip on their shoulder to do it. If this game was in Buffalo, it'd be no question I'm picking the Bills. They're not going to lose that game this year in front of their fans, but it's in Arrowhead. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think Josh Allen and them boys are going to be salty as hell.
I
I
hope
think they're
so.
going to come out and try to physically beat them to death. I think the Bills are going to win the game. I think they'll win by more than one touchdown, like a 10-point game. And the other reason I'm saying this
I like these
too,
bold predictions, man.
yeah, well, I mean, got to put it out there. Here's the other piece. Mahomes is great, this, that, and the other, but he has gotten every benefit of every call in the playoffs. And this has
True.
been a reoccurring thing.
Yeah.
And the NFL is very aware that the entire league outside of Kansas City is like, this is some bullshit. Y'all got to stop it. I don't think he's going to get those calls, number one. And I honestly think that Travis Kelce is on the back half, easily on the back half of
Oh,
his
I think
career.
he's maybe one more year.
Yeah,
He had a nice
I
catch.
do too.
He had
I
a,
do too.
he had a nice catch. He had like a 50-yard reception, but he was bare ass wide open. He's not like I don't
He's
know.
he's been getting schemed to be open instead of actually being
Getting
open,
open, right?
right? And so that to me tells me a lot. Now they've reloaded. They've got Xavier Worth, all these guys that are speedsters, this, that, and the other. I just think eventually it's not going to matter. It's sort of like this reminds me of when the Bulls lost to the Pistons in the 80s and 90s before they became the dynasty. How they lost 4 years in a row to Detroit.
Yeah,
I think this is where we're at, and I think Josh Allen is going to be like, it's my time.
I hope so. It's going to be
He's
fun.
not scared to go there.
It'll
And
be
then with the
football.
NFC East matchup, because that's what this is. This is old school NFC East.
Yeah,
I am picking the Eagles over Washington. A couple of reasons. Number one, even though Jaden Daniels has answered the call so far, I think he's going to see a complexity of defense this year, this week. I'm from I'm working on my second master's, University of Georgia. That Georgia Bulldog defense, because that's what it is up in Philadelphia. They got like 8 guys from the University of Georgia that won those
Yeah,
two
really?
championship
Okay.
teams. Oh yeah, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, N'Kobe Dean, who's injured, but they have a lot of Georgia players.
yep.
And Howie Roseman is the general manager in Philadelphia, and to show you how much he respects that Georgia team, he went to the University of Florida and drafted a lot of University of Georgia guys. If you're from the South, you know that's a big damn deal.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the defense of the Eagles are going to have something for Jaden Daniels. I really do. And I think Jalen Hurts, he's been banged up, nicked up. It's not about Jalen. It's about Saquon Barkley. I
Yeah,
think
I
the
knew that was
biggest
going.
acquisition in the offseason this year were the Eagles getting, in my opinion, the best running back in football outside of Travis Henry. And Derrick Henry, rather. And I honestly
You take
think,
Derrick Henry over Saquon in your
yes,
backfield.
yes, you know why?
Why?
Because in the fourth quarter, when it's cold, and we saw a little bit of it last week, but
Okay.
Baltimore's defense failed in a lot of respects. You would rather hit Saquon, if you had to hit one, than Derrick Henry. I'm just telling you straight up.
Yeah,
From a guy that played linebacker, there are dudes where I'm like, okay, if I have to hit him, I will. And then there are dudes like, I pray to God I don't have to hit him, period. And that's Derrick Henry,
dude,
right? Still. And so
he's a beast.
I think that Saquon is going to be the difference. I think he's going to run for over 100 yards on that Washington defense no matter what they do.
Yep.
And I think that's why the Eagles are going to win, and we're going to have a Bills-Eagles Super Bowl.
That'd be fun. I can do that. I can get into that.
Yeah. No, I think it'd be great, and I think that's what hopefully happens. And I think the entire country will root for the Buffalo Bills outside of Philadelphia. Yep. I really do. Outside of that fan base.
Bills, one other thing, plus they got DeMar Hamlin, right?
Yes, and that story, yes. Yeah, the man basically died on the field for Buffalo.
Who literally died. He had commotio cordis. I'm going to drop some medical stuff, right here. So the chances of you getting commotio... So when you learn about commotio cordis, which is you get hit in the chest with something, and you have a cardiac arrest. Your heart stops beating. It's actually fibrillating. It's just kind of wiggling and not in an organized way. Because the chances of that happening, like something hitting you in the chest at the exact right millisecond to induce this cardiac rhythm is minuscule. I mean, it's on the order of 1 in tens of millions. And when you learn about it in medical school or as an emergency room doctor, when you learn about commotio cordis, the example that they use, everyone has these examples to teach classic medical case presentation type thing. The example is always a little league kid gets hit in the chest with a ball and then drops down and has a cardiac arrest. And just so that's a shockable rhythm, meaning so he's in V-fib, so all they had to do was shock him, and that's why he lived. If you're in a non-shockable rhythm, it's a lot worse. But the reason, anytime your heart stops like that, the big problem, in addition to the longer you're arrested, it's harder for your heart to get working. The reason it's a big problem is your brain's not getting oxygen during that time. So DeMar easily could have survived that cardiac arrest and not made a full recovery and had neurological damage, and he didn't, which is wild. It's wild to me that these trainers got on the field and not only saved this guy's life, which they did, they saved his career.
Yes.
Which is, bananas. There are so many people who have cardiac arrest and they have neurological damage, like they're having a stroke because their brain's not getting oxygen. And DeMar Hamlin is in the minority of minority folks who have a cardiac arrest and live to tell about it and have a good outcome like that. So I'm always going to root for that guy.
Dude, man, I think you nailed it. They didn't just save his life, they saved his quality of life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this kid, last week had a turnover. Yep. In the playoff game they had. So I'm like, dude, this would be like the comeback story of the damn century. Yeah. Where this guy was damn near dead. And not like just the trainers, like you said, knowing what they had to do, and then the close proximity of the trauma hospital to the Bengals stadium, is another thing that people cited as why he's still here.
Yeah, they saved his life on the field. They saved his life probably in the first 90 seconds. Yep. I bet they slapped an AED on him and it said shock, and they shocked him and got him back into
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy that we have that type of technology that's portable, ready to go. But most importantly, the trainers and everybody were well trained to identify and do what they had to do.
Absolutely.
Lord knows my mind would have been racing.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a cool weekend.
Talk about cardiac arrest sometime.
We definitely going to have to do that.
CPR and how to use an AED and all that stuff. You'll save someone's life someday. So
we definitely need to do that. We kind of forget that you are an actual emergency room trauma surgeon
with an enthusiastic football fan though. So all right, Bobby. Well, let's end it there, and we'll see who turns out. We'll see who turns out right. Maybe we get surprised, and it is Bills and Commanders in the Super Bowl, and we'll have lots of fun with that. So
I'm gonna keep record on our predictions. So I'm hoping.
All right, guys.
All right.
See you next time.
See you guys next week.
Listening.